Interdependent Origination, Dhamma Talk number 6. Salayatana Pichya Paso. Because of six sense bases as condition, mental contact arises. This is the fifth link of the dependent origination. The last link, the fourth, is the mind and matter as condition, six sense bases arises. So these six sense bases and the fourth link are eye base, ear base, nose base, tongue base, body base and mind base. Six bases. And these six bases arises due to mind and matter. I won't review the whole thing again here. But one must study to have a grounded knowledge of the past lectures of dependent origination, so that you'll be able to proceed with efficiency. Now we are talking about the fifth link. The fifth link is sense bases are the contributing factor and the mental contact is the contributed factor. So what does it mean by sense basis at this fifth link? It refers to the six internal sense bases which we have just mentioned: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind bases, as well as six external objects that correspond to each base. So, a bit different here in the fifth when we call sense bases. So what are these corresponding objects to each basis? Visible form correspond to the eye, sound correspond to the ear, smell correspond to the nose, and taste correspond to the tongue, and the touch sensation correspond to the body, and the mental objects correspond to the mind base. So in here, the objects that correspond to each base are also included in the sense basis or salayatana. So six internal bases, and if you remember the word, it's also called six internal sensitivity basis or sensitivity. It's alone is not sufficient to do the task on this fifth link. to put into action at this 6 internal bases requires corresponding 6 kinds of external objects. So, in this link, when we say Salayatana, 6 internal bases, to become contributing factor, it requires 6 counterparts. Therefore, 6 sense bases become 6 pair of sense bases, or you can call it 12 bases, which is 6 internal bases plus 6 external bases in the 5th link. So Salayatana, sense bases. In the 4th link, it's only 6 internal bases, but at the 5th link, it is 6 external plus 6 internal, altogether 12. Bear in mind though, this mind and matter cannot give rise to external objects. It can only contribute to the internal objects. Therefore, there are only 6 internal bases in the 4th link, because mind and matter can, so to speak, create only the internal basis. So, in the change of 12 links of dependent origination, some factors that belong to one link become somewhat different or varies in the preceding link. Case in point is what we are talking right now. Based on the role it plays under different conditions, it changes. Again, case in point is the 4th link and the 5th link, what we call Salayatana, 6 sense bases. So that's what mean by Salayatana, sense basis in the 5th link. That is the conditioning factor. And the conditioned factor, what arises out of it is called passo, or that's a grammatically Salayatana pyasya passo. But singularly, if you talk that word, it called phassa, P-H-A-S-S-A. And phassa is translated into English as mental contact. Phassa is mental contact. And this mental contact is one of the 52 mental factors. We have already discussed about 52 mental factors, or they are the mental associates. They always, one or the other of these, always associate with the consciousness that is arising. So, this is one of the mental associates or mental factors. And also you can say it belongs to the one of the 7 universal mental factors. 7 universal mental factors. You can call it a subgroup under the main heading of mental factors, which are 52. In this subgroup, there are 7. It's called universal mental factors. because these sevens always associated with any kind of consciousness that's arising. We already have discussed about it. And what are these seven? Just to repeat, to remind. It's called Phassa, mental contact, Vedana, feeling, Sanya, perception, Cetana, volition, Ekaggata, one-pointedness, Jivitindriya, life force, and Manasikara, attention. Those are the seven. These seven mental factors always arises with any kind of consciousness that is arising. That's why they are called universal or common to all. So that is Phassa, mental contact. Just to show you under what category it belongs. So let's see how this Phassa is, to understand it a little more in detail. And Buddha always explained any mental states with 4 approaches: characteristics, functions, manifestation, and proximate cause. If you approach a mental state with these 4 different angles, you have a thorough and complete understanding of it. So let's see what are the characteristics of Phassa, mental contact is. Characteristics in Pali is called Lakkhana. Characteristics, Lakkhana. Phassa literally means touching. Touching. It includes some materiality as a part of the required conditions for this Phassa to arise, or for this Phassa to form. Some material quality. But regardless, it surely is not a physical phenomenon. Phassa is not a physical phenomenon. It is the mental phenomenon, even though some conditions are materiality. That is why we should call this Phassa as mental contact, instead of simply calling contact, to avoid confusion. When you say contact, you might be thinking about actually physically touching. This is simply mental contact. No actual physical touching involved in this process. It is the mental touch, or you can say it mental contact, mental touch or mental contact of visible object. Visible object. Visible objects, in other words, is the external rupa, external material. Okay. Any material that is external, not in your body, not with your body, that's a visible object. And the eye base. Eye basis, you can call it simply eye, and that is the internal rupa, internal materiality. The eye is the internal materiality because it is a part of your body. Anything with the body in the body is called internal. That is out of the body is called external. I base, internal materiality, but even though we say I, precisely it is the retina and the nerve system. That's what it is referring to when we say I base. So visible object, I base, and attention. The third one is attention. Okay. When we say attention, you can understand in a different way. It's a consciousness. Only consciousness can operate this mental factor called attention, manasikara. Okay. Manasikara, attention, mental associates. But as we already said, these mental associates, if they are there, consciousness is there. If consciousness is there, this mental associate is there. So when we use the word attention, you can understand that's a consciousness. In this case, we are talking about the physical form and the I. So in this particular case, this particular consciousness is seeing consciousness, not any other consciousness, seeing consciousness. So, to repeat again, it is the mental touching or mental contacting of these three things. What are they? Visible form, I base, and consciousness. Those three things come in contact, mental contact, not an actual physical contact. So that's the characteristics of phassa, mental contact. What's the function? What does this do? What does phassa do? What's its job? What is its task? In Pali, function is called kicca. Okay, phassa or mental contact task or function is to strike the sense objects. Okay? Mental contact task or function is to strike at the sense objects in one line. So in this particular case, we are using I or seeing consciousness as the explaining parts. So in this part, in this case, striking or giving attention to the form. Striking or giving attention to the form. What is form? Visible object. That comes into the venue of the eye sensitivity. So the function is to strike, or in other words, to give attention to the visible form that is in view of the eye. In view of the eye. This eye, we call it eye sensitivity. Another word is eye base. When the object is striking the eye, we call it eye sensitivity. When we try to talk about the consciousness arising, we call it eye base, if you remember. So that's a function. I will use another words to explain the same thing. So what's that? Phassa, mental contact, makes a sense object and consciousness engage at the eye base. Phassa makes a sense object and a consciousness engage or get involved at the sense base. Let's try another way. What is this phassa function? Making of the sense object, sense base, and consciousness to come together. Phassa is, function is making of the sense object, sense base, and consciousness to come together. Created a condition. That condition is phassa. In other words, phassa created that condition. So, that is the function, the job or the task of phassa, mental contact. We know its characteristics now, we know its function now. And the next one is manifestation. What does it manifest it when it happens? Rasa in Pali, R-A-S-A, rasa. Manifestation. Manifestation is, let's call it in general, something that comes out of the union of these three factors. Something that comes out of the union of these three factors. What are these three factors? External materiality, internal materiality, and consciousness. If we are going to use the eye as an example, it is the visible form, eye base, and seeing consciousness. Something that comes out of the union of these three is its manifestation. So, just to show a few obvious example of this. We all know that a deer crossing the road at night, and then suddenly the car drive towards that deer. So the car has a big headlight, and the headlight shone, and the deer saw it. Headlight, external object, deer's eyes, internal object. And then, of course, it's aware of the big light. That's attention. These three come in contact. At that moment, what happened was suddenly deer froze. Doesn't run away. Totally deer froze. The headlights shining in the eyes. That frozen state is the manifestation of phassa. Another example, okay, you're walking on the road, and then there's, let's say, there's some Indian restaurants, then you can smell the spicy odor of all the food that they are cooking. You breathe it in, and suddenly you develop some saliva in your mouth. The smell is the external object. The nose is the internal object. You pay full attention, become aware of the smell. Those three met, and suddenly the saliva produced in your mouth. That is the manifestation of phassa, saliva producing in your mouth. And let's try another one more example. Okay, we always watch the television or read the papers, and there's a picture you saw, because let's say there's a big starvation go on in one of the country in the African continent. People are starving, dying, and there's a picture showing a child, okay, 7, 8, 9-year-old child. All that you can see is just the bones, the ribs, and a skull and a sunken eye. The hands and legs are like stick. The effect of starvation on a child. When you see that picture, suddenly your heart sank. Compassion developed in you. So the picture of that child is external object. It come and strike your eyes, internal object, and you pay full attention to it. When those three things met, compassion arises in you. That compassion is the manifestation of phassa. So that is manifestation of phassa. Characteristics, function, and manifestation. And the last one of approach is the proximate cause. What immediate factor that causes phassa, or it's called proximate cause. Proximate cause is very straight and simple, you know by now. It is the sense object that comes in contact to one's attention. Sense object that comes in contact to one's attention. That is the proximate cause, immediate cause. So when you probe through this four angle, then you will have a better understanding of the mental factor you are investigating. Here, mental factor is phassa, mental contact. We try to look from its characteristics, its functions, its manifestation, and its proximate cause. So in here, let's see, we always say these three comes in together. Of course, materiality and object outside is existing. And also your eye-based internal materiality, it is there. But they have to be in a straight line, which means the object has to be in view of the eye, or the smell has to be around there to hit your nose, or the sound that's arising has no walls or nothing blocked, it comes straight into your eardrum. That two materiality, external object and internal object, has to strike. So they are there, but only at that moment of striking. At that moment of striking, there's a specific external materiality of that moment, specific internal materiality of that moment, and specific consciousness that arises. That's what's happening at that moment. We can't talk about the past, it's gone. We can't talk about the future that's not coming yet. But we can actually talk about or deal with or feel or experience the present moment. So at that moment, let's see how these three things, their relationships are based on what we already know. So when there is a phassa, mental contact, what is this phassa, mental contact? It's called cetasika, mental factors or mental associates. Okay, phassa is a specific name, but the group name is called mental associate. So you can say when there is a mental associate, phassa, which is mental associate, there is citta, consciousness. Because without mental associate, there could be no consciousness. Without consciousness, there could be no mental associates. That's why you can make a statement. When there is phassa, there is citta. When there is mental contact, there is consciousness. That is the law, mental law. Citta niyama. And also let's see another one. When there is citta or consciousness, okay, when there is citta or consciousness, at this present moment, you can definitely say there is a sense base. Because consciousness cannot arise without a sense base, without a material base. There must be a material base for the consciousness to arise. So we can definitely say when there is a consciousness, there exists a sense base. The first one is when there is a phassa, there is a consciousness. When there is a consciousness, there is a sense base. And look at another one. When there is the consciousness, there is a sense object. Because without the object, without engaging with the conscious object, consciousness cannot arise. There must be an object for consciousness to know, and only then a specific type of consciousness can arise. So when there is a consciousness, there is a sense object. When there is a consciousness, there is a sense base. When there is a consciousness, there is a phassa. So all these three are interdependently supporting. No. Interdependent. They depend on each other. Without one, the other cannot exist. Without one, the other two cannot exist. Without the two, the third one cannot exist. They are interdependently existing. Interdependent. So that is why sense base, salayatana in Pali, sense base. Sense object, it's the rupa, materiality. And consciousness coexist together at the same time. That's the reason we say these three coexist. These are together. They arise together. And the reason is consciousness cannot exist without the sense base or the phassa. So is the other way around, all the way around. So all three needs to be there, coexist there for phassa, which is called mental associate, to arise. So what's phassa? Phassa is coming together of the three. What are these three? Sense object, sense base, and consciousness. That's phassa. What is phassa? Phassa is, you can call it in a way, it is the arising of the attention. When a visible object strikes the eye sensitivity, they all happen instantly at the same time. Arising of the attention, the same time as when the visible object strikes the eye sensitivity. That's phassa. I think that covers fairly well about what phassa is and what sensitivity, salayatana, is at the fifth link, this particular link. And of course, there are 6 kinds of phassa, 6 kinds of mental contact. Based on what? Based on 6 kinds of consciousness. Okay. What consciousness are there? Based on the eye consciousness, sakhu vijnana. When there's an eye consciousness, that's the eye-related mental contact. Ear consciousness, there's another ear-related mental contact. And so is with the smell consciousness, taste consciousness, nose or tongue, body consciousness, and the mind consciousness, manayatana, mano vijnana, base and consciousness, and there's the contact. Based on this 6 type of consciousness, seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, smelling consciousness, tasting consciousness, touching consciousness, or thinking consciousness, 6 types of phassa, mental contacts, can be enumerated. So that's covered this particular link. What is that? Salayatana picaya phasso. Because of the sixth sense basis, mental contact arises. May all of you be able to understand the lecture and be able to apply in your practical experience and learn the true nature of mind and matter experientially as soon as possible. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much.